The year was 2342 by Terran reckoning. Humanity, having wrestled with its own self-destructive impulses for centuries, had finally survived its tumultuous infancy on a weary blue marble. The scars of the great resource wars were fading, replaced by the gleaming ambition of a species finally looking outward, yearning for the stars. Our nascent FTL drives, clunky and temperamental marvels of engineering, had begun to stretch beyond the comforting, familiar embrace of the Sol system. Fragile colonies, gleaming like nascent jewels, dotted a handful of habitable worlds in nearby star clusters. Ethelberg, a hardy mining outpost, Viridian Prime, a lush agricultural world, and Solstice Haven, a vital trade hub in the Kepler system. Our interstellar vessels, the sturdy Pathfinder-class survey ships, equipped for deep space cartography and geological analysis, the tireless Voyager freighters, immense modular beasts that ferried life, supplies, and raw materials, and the fledgling, awkwardly designed Guardian frigates, our first dedicated warships, conceived from necessity rather than martial might, were monumental triumphs of human perseverance. Each one represented countless hours of painstaking research, daring engineering, and sheer collective will, forged from a history of scarcity and hard-won progress. Yet, to the ancient galactic powers, to civilizations that measured their dominion in millennia, these ships were less triumphs and more crude contraptions of bolted metal, exposed conduits, and visible stress fractures. They were glorified tin cans, especially when contrasted with the sleek, almost organically sculpted forms of the vessels that now filled the main viewports of the USTS Vanguard. The Vanguard, a state-of-the-art Pathfinder-class vessel, was on a deep space charting mission, probing the edges of a sector marked unexplored on Terran star charts, a vast, star-strewn canvas of possibility. It was here, in the cold, silent void beyond the charted fringes of known space, that they encountered the Cygnian hegemony. The meeting was not one of equals, nor of discovery, but of stark, brutal revelation. Grand Marshal Vorlag of the Cygnian hegemony, a being whose very presence exuded millennia of undisputed power and unquestioning supremacy, drifted into the Vanguard's comms range. His ship, the Star Eater, was a nightmare of glistening obsidian black, its prow like a sharpened blade against the starfield. Vorlag's image, projected onto the Vanguard's bridge's main screen, was a chilling spectacle. He was a creature of shimmering obsidian black carapaced plates, their facets catching the distant starlight with a malevolent glint. Multiple segmented limbs, tipped with wickedly sharp, chitinous claws, twitched with a predatory grace. His eyes, compound and multifaceted, swirled with an unsettling, opalescent light, betraying an alien intelligence far removed from humanity's own, an intellect cold and ancient. Every inch of his being, every subtle click of his mandibles, every minute shift of his carapace embodied the ancient, boundless arrogance that defined his species. The Cygnians had conquered hundreds of systems, their empire vast and unchallenged, their technology refined over countless cycles of domination. They knew only victory, and they expected nothing less from every encounter. This is Grand Marshal Vorlag of the Cygnian hegemony. His voice, a low, buzzing hum that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the Vanguard's crew, resonated through the bridge's speaker system. It was the sound of a predator assessing a prey animal. "Identify yourselves, primitives." Commander Kalen Vance, captain of the USTS Vanguard, stood at the command console, his spine rigid, his gaze locked with the alien marshal's projected form. Vance was a man whose dark eyes held the weariness of 100 jump calculations and the deep-seated fire of an unbroken spirit. He was an explorer by trade, a leader by instinct, and now, unwittingly, humanity's first ambassador to a truly alien power, thrust into a confrontation he was ill-prepared for. "This is Commander Kalen Vance, captain of the United Solarian Terran ship Vanguard. We are explorers, charting new space in the name of humanity." His voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the tension coiling in his gut, none of the sudden dread that had seized the bridge crew. Vorlag's compound eyes seemed to focus, shifting through a spectrum of colors, and a series of rapid guttural clicks from his mandibles resonated through the comms. Vance, with a flash of uncomfortable intuition, recognized it as amusement, a sound utterly devoid of warmth, mocking and cruel. Explorers, your vessel? It is crude. Its energy signature suggests a reliance on fission, a technology our kind abandoned millennia ago. Your FTL drive, a mere warp skip, is laughably inefficient. It tears at the quantum fabric, leaving chaotic wakes that take cycles to dissipate, disrupting even ambient subspace. A wasteful, unsophisticated method of transit. A low, guttural chittering sound, translated by the Universal Comms Unit, a marvel of human ingenuity itself, as a form of derisive laughter, filled the Vanguard's bridge, prolonged and utterly dismissive. You stumble into our sovereign territory in a glorified cargo hauler. Return to your designated system, humanity. You are not ready for the galaxy. Your species is provincial, unworthy of true galactic interaction. The sheer condescension was a physical blow. Vance felt it, a cold, sickening wave that washed over him. His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching in his cheek, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. Around him, the bridge crew stiffened. Lieutenant Anya Riel, the comms officer, looked pale. Tactical Officer Jax Novik's hand hovered over his weapons console, but there was no target to acquire, no threat to engage. "We mean no offense, Grand Marshal," Vance managed, his voice tightening with effort. "We merely seek to understand. Our drive is efficient enough for us. It has taken us far. It is our way." "Efficient enough for a provincial species," Vorlag retorted, the amusement in his voice hardening into unyielding disdain. "You possess no graviton core, no zero-point reactors. Your warships," he gestured vaguely with one segmented limb towards the distant, barely discernible outlines of the two accompanying Guardian frigates, the USTS Sentinel and the USTS Bastion, are barely armed transport craft. Truly an amusing spectacle for our patrols to stumble upon. Consider this a generous warning, Commander Vance. Should your fleet approach any Cygnian-designated system again, should you dare to cross into our dominion, we will not offer dialogue. We will simply dismantle you, piece by piece. The connection severed abruptly, leaving an icy chill in the Vanguard's bridge that had nothing to do with the vacuum of space. The silence that followed was thick with outrage and humiliation, a shared experience that bonded the crew in a profound, unsettling way. "Son of a primitive?" Chief Engineer Dr. Ilara Petrova exploded, slamming her fist on a console. Petrova was a brilliant woman, a theoretical physicist whose mind operated at light speed and whose hands knew every rivet and wire of a human FTL drive. Her usually serene features, often lost in complex equations, were now contorted with a fury that transformed her gentle demeanor. "Our fission drives power half our colonies. Our warp skips traverse dozens of light years. They're the culmination of centuries of human ingenuity built from nothing. We brought ourselves back from the brink of extinction with this technology. To them, it's like sailing a wooden ship across an ocean they cross in a hyperjet," Captain Lian Zhu, the Vanguard's quiet tactical officer, observed grimly. Zhu was a woman of few words, her posture always poised, but her insights were always precise and cutting, honed by years of strategic analysis. "They view our technology as charmingly archaic at best, contemptibly inefficient at worst. A curiosity, perhaps, never a threat." Vance turned from the blank main screen, his face a mask of controlled fury that barely hid the burning humiliation beneath. He looked out at the silent, stunned faces of his crew. They might laugh at our ships, at our drives, at our very existence, but they haven't seen what we can do with them. Not yet. They've underestimated the very spirit that forged these primitive machines. The encounter, later dubbed the Vorlog snub by the galactic media and the insult at the rim by humanity, spread like wildfire through human space. News broadcasts played Vorlog's derisive laughter on an endless loop, a constant grating reminder of humanity's perceived weakness. It ignited a spark of indignant pride, a fierce collective resolve that hadn't been seen since the chaotic period of the Great Resource Wars centuries ago. The message from the Cygnians was clear, etched into every human heart. Humanity was seen as small, weak, utterly insignificant, a nascent species to be contained, perhaps even culled, should it dare to grow beyond its designated boundaries. And for humanity, a species that had clawed its way back from near self-annihilation, that was an unacceptable truth. The Cygnians' mocking laughter would not be forgotten. It would become the fuel for humanity's next great leap, a leap born of defiance. 6 months later, the Cygnians made good on their threat, though not in the brutal, destructive way humanity had braced for. They didn't strike Terra, the cradle of humanity, nor did they engage in a full-scale invasion of human-settled space. Such an act would be costly, messy, and beneath their dignity. Instead, with chilling precision, they arrived at New Eden, a bustling human colony system in the outer reaches of the Orion Arm. New Eden was teeming with ambitious terraforming projects, its atmosphere slowly being reshaped into a breathable paradise. And more importantly, it had yielded newly discovered incredibly rich, rare earth element deposits crucial to Terra's burgeoning interstellar industries, vital for constructing new FTL drives, advanced superconductors, and sophisticated sensor arrays. Without them, human expansion would stagnate. A formidable fleet of 20 Cygnian capital ships, including 5 gargantuan battlecruisers like the Shadow Sovereign and the Void Harvester, and 15 sleek cruisers such as the Silent Predator and the Star Devourer, positioned themselves in a tight, impenetrable cordon around New Eden's primary warp gate. They were silent, ominous, a wall of obsidian against the starlight, their sheer size and technological superiority radiating an unquestionable authority. Their message, broadcast on a looping frequency that penetrated even the most shielded human comms, was terse and absolute, a declaration of ownership. Cease all mining operations. New Eden is now Cygnian Protectorate Zone 7. Any attempt by Terran vessels to enter or exit will be met with overwhelming force. This territory is now property of the Cygnian hegemony. Resist and suffer the consequences. The Terran Commonwealth Council, meeting in emergency session in the polished, crystalline chambers of Unity Station, orbiting Terra, erupted. The political chambers devolved into a cacophony of panicked voices, outraged shouts, and desperate appeals. Speaker Aaron Thorne struggled to maintain order amidst the chaos. Protests, fueled by outrage and existential fear, filled the streets of orbital habitats and terrestrial cities across Sol. Humanity's entire interstellar economy and its ambitious expansion plans hinged precariously on New Eden's resources. This wasn't just an insult, it was an economic strangulation, a slow, deliberate death sentence for human expansion. Without New Eden, the dream of interstellar empire building would wither and die, forcing humanity back into its tiny, vulnerable corner of the galaxy. "We can't break through," General I.S. Croft stated bluntly during the emergency strategy meeting convened in Terra's orbital command center. Croft, a veteran strategist whose face was etched with the exhaustion of countless simulated defeats, pointed to the hollow table where projections showed Cygnian forces arrayed like an unbreakable shield. "Our entire combined fleet, the Vanguard, 2 other Guardian-class frigates, Sentinel, Bastion, and a dozen armed freighters hastily refitted for combat, numbers less than half of their capital ships. We have 42 vessels at most that can even attempt a fight. And our weaponry? It's designed for asteroid deflection and low-intensity piracy, for self-defense against rogue asteroid miners, not fleet engagements against a force of this magnitude. It's a suicide mission." "They'd gut us like fish," Dr. Alara Petrova added, hunched over the hollow table, her fingers dancing across the projected combat scenarios. Each simulation, grimly, ended with human ships dissolving into plasma plumes, their pathetic energy signatures swallowed by the Cygnians' overwhelming firepower. Their grav beams cut through our ablative armor like paper. Their shields shrug off our kinetic rounds as if they were pebbles skipping on a pond. We don't have the offensive or defensive capabilities. Commander Kalen Vance, now elevated to fleet commander of the newly formed Terran Expeditionary Force, TEF, stood at the head of the table. He hadn't slept in days, his mind a whirlwind of tactical data, historical battles, and abstract physics. The weight of humanity's future pressed heavily on his shoulders, a crushing burden that simultaneously sharpened his focus. They're not attacking because they don't need to. They're demonstrating, proving their superiority without expending significant resources on a full war. They expect us to back down, to meekly accept our fate. They want us to surrender without a fight. And we won't, Captain Lian Shu said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through the despair and resignation in the room. Her dark eyes, usually calm, now held a fierce, unwavering light. New Eden is home to millions of our people, our families, our future. We don't abandon our own. Not while a single ship can still fly, not while a single human heart still beats with defiance. Her quiet resolve ignited a flicker of hope, a spark in the overwhelming darkness. Exactly. Vance began to pace, his boots echoing in the silent room, the rhythmic sound a counterpoint to the racing thoughts in his head. They laugh at our ships, they call them primitive. But what if that's our strength? A collective frown settled on the faces of the officers and council members. Skepticism, thick and heavy, hung in the air. Admiral Serena Kale, head of the Terran Fleet Command, shifted uneasily. Senator Darius Vance, no relation to Kalen, a fierce advocate for peaceful coexistence, raised a skeptical eyebrow. Commander? General Croft raised an eyebrow, a rare flicker of surprise in his tired eyes. How exactly is having inferior technology a strength in a direct confrontation with the Signians? Because they assume they understand it, Vance explained, a glimmer of an idea, still nascent but powerful, beginning to form in his eye. They assume our primitive technology adheres to their ancient established rules of warfare, to their refined galactic combat doctrines. They've grown complacent with their advanced tech, relying on brute force and overwhelming power, on the sheer invincibility of their ships. They expect us to fight their fight, on their terms in a way that plays to all their advantages. He paused, looking at each face in turn, letting the silence amplify his words. But we're not fighting their fight. We're fighting ours, and our fight is born of scarcity, of relentless ingenuity, of a bloody-minded refusal to lose when all hope seems lost. It's born of the human spirit that builds something great out of nothing, that turns disadvantage into opportunity. We fight with our minds, with our defiance, and with the desperate courage that only a cornered species can muster. Over the next few weeks, the TF, a patchwork fleet of genuine warships, hastily armed freighters, and even a few civilian transport ships volunteered by their incredibly brave crews, gathered in the deepest, most clandestine reaches of the Sol system. The Jupiter shipyards, Mars's industrial complexes, and the orbital manufacturing rings hummed with unprecedented activity. Resources were scarce, stretched thin across a desperate populace. But every human shipyard, every industrial fabrication plant worked overtime, fueled by a grim, shared determination. Sleep was a luxury. Food was rationed. Every available resource was poured into this desperate gamble. The Signians, ever arrogant, watched. Their long-range probes leisurely scanned the human vessels, their sensor data confirming the primitiveness, the small, almost laughable arsenals, the slow sublight speeds. Signian Fleet Commander Theron, Vorlag's second-in-command, reported regularly that the Terrans were engaging in pathetic futile preparations. Grand Marshal Vorlag occasionally broadcast public messages of disdain, as both a mocking humanity's futile preparations, his buzzing laughter echoing across interstellar channels, amplified for maximum humiliation. "Look at them!" Vorlag's voice boomed across the interstellar comms channels, a broadcast intended for every sentient species in the sector, a grand display of Signian might and a warning to any who might consider aiding humanity. Their fleet assembles like children playing with rocks. Their propulsion units sputter, their energy readings barely register beyond ambient radiation. They claim they will break our cordon, they will break against us like foam on a reef. This is not war, this is merely the culling of pests, an exercise in discipline. The galaxy listened, and many agreed. The Signians had never been truly defeated. Their technology was peerless, their fleet seemingly unconquerable, their dominion absolute. Humanity, in its clumsy vessels, was merely a speck, a transient annoyance, soon to be brushed aside and forgotten. The betting odds among the larger galactic powers were overwhelmingly against humanity. The Veloxian merchant guilds put humanity's chances at less than 0.01%. They had yet to understand the human capacity for the impossible. the sheer, unyielding will of a species pushed to its limit. Dr. Ilara Petrova, a name whispered with awe in the rarefied halls of theoretical physics and engineering, had been a pioneer in FTL theory. Her seminal work on subquantum entanglement, once considered fringe science, had paved the way for humanity's first successful warp-skip drives, allowing for interstellar travel where before there was none. She was a scientist first, a soldier by necessity, and a stubborn, fiercely independent individual by nature, with a mind that effortlessly bridged the gap between abstract theory and practical application. When Vance presented his audacious, desperate plan, her eyes, usually hidden behind thick-rimmed glasses, gleamed with an almost manic intensity, the kind that only a true visionary possessed when confronted with a problem deemed utterly unsolvable by conventional means. "It's insane, Commander," she'd said, a wide, almost terrifying grin spreading across her face, mirroring the wild glint in her eyes. "Utterly, spectacularly insane. It violates every principle of established FTL warfare. But it just might work. It exploits every single one of their assumptions about how physics should work and how primitive races should fight." The plan was deceptively simple in concept, terrifying in its execution, and utterly reliant on the Cygnians' unwavering ingrained belief in their own technological and tactical superiority. Humanity's primitive warp-skip drives, unlike the Cygnians' elegant and sophisticated graviton cores, didn't open stable macroscopic wormholes that allowed for smooth, predictable transit. Instead, they briefly shifted a ship's immediate spacetime into a localized quantum flux, a momentary tear in reality, allowing it to skip from one point to another faster than light. The Cygnians considered this crude and unpredictable, prone to navigational errors, leaving a chaotic quantum wake, and certainly too energy-intensive and dangerous for larger vessels or repeated use. They saw it as a desperate, inefficient last resort, a sign of humanity's technological backwardness. Cygnian tactical manuals dismissed such primitive FTL methods as too unstable for military application. But Petrova, in her relentless pursuit of understanding the warp-skip's mechanics, had been working on something else for years, an obscure theoretical branch of FTL physics, a way to manipulate the warp-skip's transient quantum wake, not just let it dissipate harmlessly into the void. Her research assistant, Dr. Anya Riel, a brilliant young quantum engineer, had spent countless hours validating Petrova's intricate equations. "Think of it like this," Petrova explained to the gathered commanders in the Vanguard's briefing room, gesturing at the hollow table with a frantic energy that belied her usual calm. "Their graviton cores create a stable, predictable tunnel through subspace. They know exactly where they're going, and they know exactly where they're coming from. It's like a meticulously engineered highway, perfectly smooth and efficient, with designated lanes and exits. Our warp-skip, however, is more like an improvised shortcut through a dense, untamed forest. It's messy, it's chaotic, and it leaves a literal trail of disturbance behind us." Captain Lian Shu, ever the tactician, picked up on it with a knowing nod, a rare smile touching her lips. "So, while they're cruising on their highway, oblivious in their perfect tunnel, we're tearing through the undergrowth, leaving a literal mess behind us for them to drive into, a messy, invisible trap?" "Precisely," Petrova beamed, her eyes alight with a mad scientist's glee. "Normally, that mess is just chaotic quantum foam, dissipating harmlessly within picoseconds. But what if we don't let it dissipate? What if we amplify it, focus it with resonant frequencies and exotic matter, and then collapse it in a controlled, explosive manner, like a sonic boom that doesn't just shatter sound waves, but space-time itself? We turn our wake into a weapon." The collapse she spoke of was what they termed a quantum resonance detonation, or QRD. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It didn't fire plasma or kinetic rounds or even a particle beam. Instead, it weaponized the inherent instability of FTL travel, turning a ship's wake into a localized, focused singularity that briefly distorted space-time, capable of causing devastating sympathetic resonance in other, more advanced FTL systems. It was an ethereal, almost metaphysical weapon, a ghost in the machine of Signian technology. The theory had been debated for years, deemed too dangerous or impossible to implement. Now, it was their only hope. It won't destroy them outright, not initially, Vance clarified, his voice grave, cutting through the awe that had settled over the room. Not with a single burst, but it will, to put it simply, break their FTL drives, scramble their navigation, overload their core regulators, shunt them violently out of warp, and leave them dead in space, adrift and vulnerable. Or worse, shunt them into an uncontrolled violent emergence that could tear their ships apart from the inside. They'll be fighting their own technology. The true genius lay not just in the weapon itself, but in its delivery. The Signians, with their superior sensors, would undoubtedly detect human ships attempting to skip. Their advanced targeting systems would register the crude warp-skip signatures, but they'd dismiss the energy signatures as characteristic of primitive warp skips. Too inefficient, too small a threat to bother with, too crude to pose a real danger. Their algorithms would flag it as negligible disturbance. They wouldn't anticipate that the primitive jump signature was a sophisticated, insidious trap, a hidden dagger disguised as a clumsy stumble. The Terran Expeditionary Force was divided into 3 distinct waves, each with a crucial, desperate role in the symphony of destruction. Wave Alpha. This spearhead consisted of the fastest, most maneuverable Guardian-class frigates and a few modified courier vessels, stripped down for speed and enhanced with Petrova's QRD generators. Led by the Vanguard under Commander Vance and Captain Shu, along with Captain Ronan Dex of the USTS Stinger and Captain Lyra Voss of the USTS Comet. Their mission was harrowing. Execute deep, rapid skips into the very heart of the Signian formation, leaving their QRD signatures behind like deadly invisible mines. They were the bait, the disruptors, the ghost in the Signians' machine designed to sow chaos. Their survival hinged on speed, precision, and Signian arrogance. Wave Beta, composed of armed freighters like the Iron Will and the Mule Train, and even some refitted Voyager transports, these vessels were slower and more ponderous, but they were equipped with newly developed, highly potent electromagnetic pulse, EMP, charges and drastically modified kinetic railguns, designed to punch through anything short of a capital ship's main shield. Captain Orion Vance of the Iron Will and Commander Anya Thorne of the Mule Train would lead this wave. Their mission? Once the Signians were destabilized and confused by the QRDs, they would close in, launch EMPs to disable shields and secondary systems, and then hammer the exposed hulls with heavy kinetic fire. Their role was the brutal, close-quarters slugfest, the blunt force trauma. Wave Gamma, this seemingly suicidal wave, consisted entirely of civilian transports, lightly armed but repurposed with powerful wide-area jammers and sensor ghost emitters. Vessels like the Hope's Beacon and the Wanderer's Respite, piloted by volunteer civilian captains such as Elara Corin and Jax Kale, would lead. Their mission? Create maximum confusion and sensory overload, broadcasting false fleet compositions in energy signatures, drawing the Signians' attention and resources away from Alpha and Beta, providing a crucial diversionary screen. They were the lambs to the slaughter designed to appear pathetic and easy targets to feed Signian hubris. They'll laugh when they see Wave Gamma, Vance had predicted during the final briefing, his gaze sweeping over the grim faces of his commanders, his voice low and steady. They'll see the unarmed transports, think we've lost our minds, sending civilians to die. They'll interpret it as a sign of our desperation and incompetence. It's exactly what we want them to think. Their contempt will be our greatest shield, their arrogance our greatest weapon. Training was brutal, pushing human crews to the very brink of exhaustion. Piloting precise microskips, calibrating QRD launches to picosecond accuracy, synchronizing EMP bursts and kinetic barrages. Every maneuver required intricate timing and flawless coordination under immense stress. Lieutenant Commander Reese Novick, the Vanguard's navigation officer, worked tirelessly, drilling routes until his eyes blurred. Dr. Ilara Petrova personally oversaw every modification, every calibration of the QRD generators, living on stims and caffeine, often collapsing in her lab for a few hours of uneasy sleep. Captain Lian Shu plotted jump vectors with surgical precision, exploiting every gravitational anomaly and stellar radiation burst to mask their true intentions. Her tactical maps a nightmare of chaotic but purposeful movements. General Elias Croft, initially deeply skeptical of such an unorthodox plan, became a fervent believer, throwing the full weight of Terra's remaining military logistics and engineering resources behind the desperate gamble. Humanity worked as one, a singular, desperate organism, driven by the memory of Vorlag's mocking laughter. The Signians remained confidently oblivious, ensconced in their bubble of technological superiority. Their patrols were lazy, their comms filled with casual chatter and arrogant boasts. Commander Xylos of the Void Harvester often scoffed at the Terran antics during his reports to Marshal Theron. They waited for humanity to make its move, fully expecting a head-on, suicidal charge that would confirm their superiority. They didn't know humanity had learned to fight dirty, to weaponize their perceived weaknesses, to turn abstract physics into a brutal, unexpected weapon. They were about to learn a very painful lesson. The date of the assault was designated Solstice Dawn, chosen for its poetic irony, a new dawn for humanity, a twilight for Signian arrogance. The Terran Expeditionary Force, now numbering close to 60 vessels, many armed with little more than upgraded cargo loaders and raw, unyielding desperation, departed the Sol system's outer rim. Their destination? New Eden and the seemingly impenetrable Signian cordon. The air on every human ship hummed with a nervous energy, a mix of fear and fervent hope, the silent prayers of millions echoing in their hearts. Grand Marshal Vorlag stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Star Eater, a vessel so vast it could swallow a human frigate whole and still have room for its cavernous hangar bays. Its bridge was a panorama of advanced holographic displays, showing the Signian fleet in perfect formation, a silent, deadly net around New Eden, their shields shimmering almost imperceptibly. His sensor officers reported the approach of the Terran fleet, their data streams meticulously analyzed by Signian supercomputers, confirming what they already knew. "They are here, Grand Marshal," a subordinate, a Signian communications officer named Xylos, chirped, his voice a low, excited buzz. "Their composition is as expected. A handful of those quaint Guardian craft, and a vast array of armed civilian vessels. A complete waste of resources, if you ask this one. They seem to be attempting a desperate gamble, devoid of any tactical sense." Vorlag's mandibles clicked, a sound of smug satisfaction that echoed his inner certainty. Indeed, their tactics are so transparent, so utterly primitive. They are attempting a diversionary wave, followed by a frontal assault with their frigates. Such predictable, unsophisticated tactics for a primitive species. Prepare to engage. Target their alpha wave first with focused disruptor beams. Show them the folly of challenging the hegemony's might, the power of true galactic engineering. He watched on the tactical display as the human fleet split. Wave Gamma, the civilian transports, peeled off, broadcasting a cacophony of false signals and energy spikes, simulating a much larger, more diverse force. They were slow, almost lumbering targets, clearly visible on Signian long-range sensors. "Look at them scatter, Grand Marshal," another Signian officer, Commander Xantos, guffawed, his multifaceted eyes glinting with amusement. "Running before the fight has even begun. They are even more cowardly than expected. A truly pathetic display." Vorlag permitted himself a thin, buzzing smile. "Their fear is palpable, Xantos. Engage Wave Gamma with disruptor fields. No need to waste energy on outright destruction. Simply disable them and capture their crews. We will interrogate them later. Then we crush their so-called frigates and end this charade. This will serve as a stark lesson for any other nascent species." But Wave Alpha, led by the Vanguard, didn't engage the Signians directly. They ignored the disruptor fields, the taunts, the overwhelming display of Signian power. Instead, they began their skip sequence, their FTL drives flaring with what the Cygnian sensors registered as familiar, crude energy signatures. "Warp skip signatures detected, Grand Marshal," Silos announced, a flicker of confusion in his normally confident tone. 20 vessels, all designated Alpha Wave, initiating skip sequence. They are attempting to breach our lines with their crude warp skips. Their coordinates indicate deep penetration. As expected, Vorlag hummed, his confidence unwavering, though a faint shadow of unease briefly crossed his compound eyes. A foolish maneuver, they will emerge directly into our defensive screens, their primitive drives leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. Prepare all forward grav cannons to fire upon emergence. We shall vaporize them the moment they flicker into real space. Do not allow them to consolidate. The Vanguard and its escort of Guardian frigates, 20 vessels in total, vanished from Cygnian sensor range in rapid succession, one after another, leaving behind only the dissipating quantum foam characteristic of a warp skip. The Cygnian fleet, immense and invincible, awaited their reemergence, their grav cannons glowing with deadly charge, their shields humming, poised to annihilate. Only the human ships didn't reemerge where expected, not directly into Cygnian weapon range. Instead, a series of violent, localized energy fluctuations erupted within the Cygnian formation, right alongside several of their battle cruisers. It wasn't a conventional weapon signature. It was a distortion, a tearing of space itself, a ripple effect that went beyond simple energy readings. "Unidentified energy anomaly," the Cygnian science officer, a young, frantic Cygnian named Xylara, shrieked, his voice climbing several octaves in panic. His limbs twitched uncontrollably. "Gravitational flux detected. Subquantum instability. It's their skip signatures, but they're not dissipating. They're collapsing in on themselves. They're creating a localized focused singularity. This is impossible." The Cygnian battlecruiser Shadow Sovereign, a behemoth of destruction and pride, shuddered violently as a QRD exploded in its immediate vicinity. Its shimmering shields, designed to deflect energy and kinetic impacts, flickered, unable to cope with the non-conventional space-time warping assault, then died with a screech of tortured energy. Its massive graviton core, designed to manipulate entire swaths of space-time with elegant precision, overloaded with a groan heard even on the Star Eater's bridge, relayed through the subetheric comms. Critical systems went dark across the Shadow Sovereign. Lights died. Emergency klaxons wailed. The ship drifted inert, a colossal derelict now at the mercy of the void, its once proud engines silent. Then another Cygnian cruiser, the Silent Predator, suffered the same fate. Its FTL drive erupted in a shower of sparks, its navigational systems going haywire, its internal integrity alarms blaring a death knell. It began to spin uncontrollably, shunted out of its stable position, its once perfect alignment ruined by the localized space-time ripple. The Cygnian officers on its bridge watched in horror as their control panels melted, and their very bodies were subjected to disorienting gravitational shifts. "What is this?" Vorlag roared, his calm facade shattering like crystalline ice. His compound eyes swiveled wildly, trying to comprehend the tactical display that was rapidly turning red, with critical warnings showing ghost images of human ships and crippled Cygnian vessels. "Report! They are not emerging, they are affecting us from within the skip. This defies our understanding of FTL mechanics." Indeed, the Vanguard and Wave Alpha were using a series of short, successive microskips, each one a mere flicker of existence, deep inside the Cygnian formation. With each skip, Dr. Ilara Petrova's QRD generators amplified the quantum wake, then collapsed it with devastating precision. It wasn't a direct attack. It was an insidious sabotage of the very fabric of space-time their advanced FTL drives relied on. The Cygnian shields, designed to absorb direct energy and kinetic impacts, were utterly useless against such an esoteric, fundamental assault. They were fighting a ghost, a weapon that struck at the heart of their physics. "They are using their primitive warp skips to ripple space itself," the Cygnian science officer, Xylara, screamed again, pulling frantically at the segmented plates on his head, a sign of extreme distress for his species. It creates a localized quantum resonance that interferes with our core regulators. Our drives are failing across the line. We cannot maintain graviton integrity. It's a cascading failure. Another Cygnian cruiser, the Void Serpent, reported its FTL drive collapsing, its internal gravity plating flickering, its crew disoriented and sick. Panic, a sensation alien to the Cygnians, who had known only conquest, rippled through the hegemony command. Ships, once proud and invincible, were suddenly dead in the water, their FTL cores sputtering, their tactical displays showing critical failures and cascading system shutdowns. A vast chasm opened in the Cygnian formation, a gap of disabled, vulnerable behemoths, adrift and unable to fight back effectively. Their mighty formation, once an unbroken wall, was now a fractured, bleeding mess. Marshal Theron, on the Void Harvester, tried desperately to re-establish lines of communication, but the quantum distortions made it impossible. "Now Wave Beta," Vance's voice, calm and clear, crackled over the Terran Expeditionary Force comms, a beacon of resolute command amidst the chaos. "Target the exposed. Give them hell. No mercy." Wave Beta. The armed freighters and transports, like the Iron Will and Mule Train, emerged from FTL at the very edge of this newly created chasm. They were slow, their engines whining under the strain of their heavy armaments, but they carried a terrible payload. Their EMP charges, crude but powerful, slammed into the Cygnian ships, shorting out secondary systems, further disrupting their already failing shields and blinding their internal sensors. The Cygnian ships went dark, like dying stars, their sleek forms now lifeless husks. Captain Orion Vance of the Iron Will barked orders, his crew moving with practiced efficiency, their faces grim but determined. Then came the kinetic rounds. Mass drivers, modified from mining equipment, roared to life, spitting out thousands of hardened tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. These weren't the precise, energy-efficient grav beams of the Cygnians, but they were raw, undeniable force, pure physical impact. Without shields, the slugs tore through plating, ripped apart conduits, and detonated internal systems with violent, explosive force. The Shadow Sovereign, though untouched by the QRDs, found itself under a relentless barrage from the humble human freighters, its once impenetrable hull now buckling under the assault. The Cygnian fleet, truly, was broken in half, not by overwhelming firepower, but by systemic collapse, navigational chaos, and the sheer, unexpected brutality of human ingenuity. Out of 20 capital ships, 6 were utterly disabled, their power cores dying, their crews trapped aboard derelicts that would soon become their tombs. 3 were critically damaged and adrift, slowly bleeding atmosphere and life, their sleek forms now twisted wrecks. The rest were struggling to maintain any semblance of cohesion, their FTL drives compromised, their communications sporadic and unreliable, their morale shattered beyond repair. Vorlag, his voice devoid of its former arrogance, replaced by a guttural, raw despair, finally ordered a retreat. His pride was shattered, his hegemony's might exposed as fragile. "Disengage! Disengage all viable units! Retreat! This is not a battle, this is an abomination, an insult to all that is Cygnian. Flee, before they devour us whole, preserve what little remains." The remaining Cygnian ships, limping and broken, their once proud forms now scarred and weeping energy, turned and initiated their emergency skip sequences, the few that could still muster the power. They leaped out of the system, their FTL wakes now genuine tears in spacetime, leaving behind a graveyard of their once proud armada, a testament to human audacity. The blackness of space swallowed their desperate retreat, leaving only silence and debris, and the faint hum of human engines. Silence, profound and disbelieving, descended over the New Eden system, broken only by the crackle of debris settling from vaporized Cygnian vessels, and the triumphant, disbelieving cheers from human ships echoing through the comms. The Cygnians were gone. The blockade, once so absolute, was broken, shattered by a species they had mocked. Commander Kalen Vance, his face smudged with exhaustion but his eyes shining with an almost unbearable light, leaned back in his command chair. He felt the trembling of his hands, the lingering adrenaline, and a profound sense of relief that threatened to overwhelm him. He glanced at Dr. Alara Petrova, who was slumped, utterly spent against her console, and Captain Lian Shu, whose quiet smile spoke volumes. "Report, Captain Shu." "New Eden is clear, Commander," Shu reported, her voice thick with emotion, a slight tremor she couldn't quite hide, even with her usual stoicism. "Their remaining ships have fled the system. We have 3 frigates, Sentinel, Bastion, Stinger, with light damage from debris and minor system overloads, and 2 armed transports, Iron Will, Mule Train, with minor hull breaches from stray Signian fire before the QRDs went active. No human casualties from the main engagement, Commander. None." A wave of relief, so profound it was almost painful, washed over Vance. They had done it. They had actually done it. The impossible. The sacrifice of resources, the countless hours of desperate engineering, the sheer, audacious gamble, it had all paid off. Dr. Alara Petrova slowly pushed herself upright, pulling off her thick-rimmed glasses and rubbing her temples, her hands shaking slightly from the prolonged mental strain. "The QRDs performed better than theoretical models, Commander. The Signians' reliance on stable, continuous graviton fields made them incredibly vulnerable to localized quantum resonance. We hit them where their technology was strongest, paradoxically creating their greatest weakness. It was a beautiful, devastating feedback loop. Their arrogance was their downfall. Their rigid adherence to superior physics blinded them. And they never saw it coming," Vance mused, staring at the debris field of Signian wreckage on the main screen, a grim monument to their victory, illuminated by the distant star. "They were so busy laughing at our primitive ships, at our crude FTL, at our very existence. They never considered what a primitive species, pushed to its limits, might do with those ships. They underestimated the human spirit, its adaptability, its sheer defiance." News of the Battle of New Eden reverberated across the known galaxy with the speed of a shockwave. It passed from star system to star system, from trade hub to military outpost, carried by every comms relay and whispered by every freighter captain. Species that had long considered the Signian hegemony an unshakable, invincible force were stunned into silence, then erupted into a cacophony of speculation and awe. The humans, a species barely out of their cradle, barely interstellar, had not only stood against the Signians, but had decisively defeated them, breaking their fleet in a manner no one had thought possible. The Signians, who had never known true defeat, were left scrambling, their entire tactical doctrines shattered, their galactic reputation in tatters. The Signians, of course, never publicly admitted their humiliation. Their official reports spoke of an unforeseen environmental anomaly in the New Eden system, and a strategic redeployment to address emergent threats elsewhere, a flimsy attempt to save face for a species that valued pride above all else. But the galactic community, especially those species who had long suffered under Signian arrogance and tyranny, the subtle Lumina Collective, the pragmatic Grothian Enclave, the ancient Xylosian Accord, saw through the transparent excuses. Images of shattered Signian ships, dead in space, their advanced systems inert, leaked through various clandestine channels, confirming the scale of the defeat. Whispers turned into murmurs, then into open discussions, and finally into outright admiration and cautious respect. Humanity, once a laughingstock, a mere provincial curiosity, was now a force to be reckoned with. Other species, previously wary, dismissive, or even predatory, began to reach out. Trade proposals, diplomatic overtures, scientific exchange requests, they poured into Terran Commonwealth space. The Signians' humiliation was humanity's diplomatic triumph, opening doors that had previously been barred. Ambassadors like Viridian Thale from the Lumina Collective and Prime Minister Xylos of the Grothian Enclave sent official envoys. Commander Kalen Vance, Dr. Alara Petrova, and Captain Lian Shu became heroes, their faces adorning every news channel, their names spoken with reverence across human space. But they knew the victory wasn't just theirs. It belonged to every human who had ever been told they weren't good enough, weren't strong enough, weren't advanced enough. It belonged to the silent engineers who labored tirelessly, the tireless miners who risked their lives, the courageous civilians who had volunteered their ships and their lives for a desperate cause. and the unyielding spirit of humanity itself. It belonged to Anya Reel, Jax Novick, Ronan Dex, Lyra Voss, Orion Vance, Anya Thorne, Alara Corrin, and Jax Cale, and countless others who had made the impossible possible. In the aftermath, Forlog's career was in ruins. He was stripped of his rank, his honor disgraced, his name a byword for colossal failure among his own kind. He spent his remaining days in a secluded, self-imposed chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of the battle, replaying the events again and again, trying to comprehend what had happened, what fundamental truth he had missed. He had scoffed at their fission reactors and warp skips, at their laughably inefficient drives. He had seen their crude, almost cobbled-together ships and dismissed them as utterly beneath his notice, focusing only on their obvious deficiencies. He had forgotten one crucial variable, the species piloting them. He had forgotten humanity. A species that didn't just adapt, it improvised with desperate, defiant brilliance. A species that didn't just survive, it thrived in the face of overwhelming odds, finding strength in weakness, turning the very principles of physics against its foes. A species that, when laughed at, didn't despair, didn't surrender. It innovated. It turned its perceived weaknesses into its greatest strengths, and its ingenuity became its most terrifying weapon. And it broke their fleet in half. Not with superior firepower, but with superior wit, with the raw, undeniable glory of human ingenuity, defiance, and unbreakable spirit. The dawn over New Eden was always beautiful, a symbol of new beginnings. But after solstice dawn, it shone with a new, brighter light, the light of humanity's unfolding destiny in a galaxy that would never underestimate them again. The laughter of the Cygnians had been silenced, replaced by a galactic silence of respect, and a quiet, burning pride within the heart of humanity.